How did a weapon system born in the era of the American Civil War manage to return to the battlefield in a way its inventor could never have imagined? You have almost certainly seen it before, but now you will finally understand why the American Gatling gun is so widely disliked. So let's go all the way back to the very beginning of the Gatling gun and follow its turbulent journey up to the modern day. It was the year 1862 when Richard Jordan Gatling, the man behind the idea, created what became known as the Gatling gun. The story goes that he designed it with a humanitarian intention after witnessing the terrible injuries suffered by soldiers on both sides of the Civil War. Firearms such as muskets and early rifles produced wounds that medical care at the time simply could not handle. Because of this, Gatling supposedly wished to invent a weapon capable of doing the work of dozens of soldiers in order to reduce the number of men who needed to die. This mindset led to his creation of a rotary-barreled gun. Depending on the model, it had either 10, 6, or 4 barrels arranged around a central shaft, and they rotated together when a hand crank was turned. During this rotation, the mechanism handled feeding, firing, extracting, and ejecting for each barrel in a sequence through an inventive mechanical system never seen before. At a certain point in the rotation, the barrel would fire a round, complete a circle, and then repeat the cycle as long as ammunition was supplied. This was a major improvement over earlier volley guns, which were essentially multiple muzzle-loading barrels grouped together but still required the slow loading process of standard muskets. In contrast, the Gatling gun offered high and sustained firepower, especially once more standardized cartridges like the .45-70 became available. Feeding the gun was the earliest challenge because belts and modern magazines did not yet exist. The first feeding system was a gravity-powered top-mounted hopper that let loose rounds fall into place one at a time. Even with this crude method, early Gatlings could achieve a sustained rate of around 200 rounds per minute, and later versions managed even more. Remember that this was during a period when a musket firing 3 rounds per minute was considered excellent. Newer rifles raised this number slightly, but nothing matched the sheer output of the Gatling gun. Soon, improved feeding systems appeared, such as the Bruce feed, which held 2 staggered rows of .45-70 cartridges and allowed almost continuous firing for as long as ammunition was supplied. With this, Gatling guns reached roughly 400 rounds per minute, astonishing for the time. Yet when Gatling presented his invention to the Union Army, he faced hesitation. Civil War commanders were conservative and initially resisted accepting that new weapons had changed the nature of combat. Tactics from the Napoleonic era, with tight formations marching across open fields, were no longer viable, but it took heavy casualties for leadership to acknowledge this. Their reluctance carried over into adopting a revolutionary gun like the Gatling. They also worried about supplying such an ammunition-hungry machine and questioned its reliability in combat, especially since early mechanical issues existed. Furthermore, reports claimed Gatling attempted to sell his gun to both the Union and the Confederacy, which did not help his case. As a result, only a few enthusiastic officers purchased Gatling guns privately, paying around $1,000 each, about $35,000 today. Because of this, the Gatling saw limited direct use in the Civil War, though it did appear in several engagements where its devastating potential was clearly demonstrated. It crushed infantry and cavalry charges and suppressed defensive positions so effectively that enemy troops could not even lift their heads to return fire, but arrived too late to influence the war's final outcome in any meaningful way. Afterward, Gatling guns were placed in fixed defensive locations or mounted on gunboats since they were too heavy and slow to accompany infantry or cavalry units. Nevertheless, they built a fearsome reputation. Their mere presence was often enough to discourage attacks, as it quickly became common knowledge what happened to anyone foolish enough to charge a machine gun position. Yet this lesson would be ignored repeatedly throughout history. Foreign armies quickly noticed Gatling's invention, making it one of the first American weapons exported internationally. The British Empire and Imperial Russia became major buyers. The British used them extensively in colonial campaigns where small numbers of soldiers armed with Gatlings defeated large groups of warriors armed only with swords or spears. By the 1880s, the Gatling gun had earned a powerful reputation, but something was about to emerge that would push it into obscurity for nearly a century. In 1884, Hiram Maxim unveiled the Maxim gun, the first true automatic machine gun. Unlike the hand-cranked Gatling with multiple barrels, the Maxim used recoil energy to operate the action, extract and eject cases, and feed new rounds from a belt. With a single water-cooled barrel, it could fire continuously with minimal overheating and only require the operator to pull the trigger. This compact and reliable system did everything the Gatling did, but in a more efficient package. By the early 1900s, every major nation produced its own Maxim-style machine gun, and the Gatling gun faded into storage, forgotten for decades until a surprising event revived it. World War I saw machine guns deployed on an unprecedented scale. They reshaped warfare, contributing significantly to the stalemate of trench combat. No army could reliably break through positions defended by machine gun nests, no matter how massive the offensive. When World War II arrived, machine guns evolved into lighter, air-cooled, belt-fed weapons with similar or better rates of fire. At the same time, tanks and aircraft changed battlefield dynamics entirely. What no one expected was that fighter aircraft, specifically jet fighters, would bring the Gatling concept back to life. How could such futuristic aircraft end up relying on a design rooted in the age of muskets and sabers? Let's break it down. During World War II, piston engine fighters grew faster and carried heavier weapons, usually multiple single-barrel machine guns or autocannons in the 20 to 30 millimeters range. When engaging enemy aircraft or attacking ground targets, pilots often had only a brief moment, sometimes seconds, to shoot. In that small window, they needed to fire as many rounds as possible to reliably hit and destroy the target. American fighters equipped with 6 or 8 high-rate .50 caliber machine guns could reach around 4,500 rounds per minute, but adding more guns increased weight and reduced space for ammunition, limiting total firing time. The arrival of jet fighters made this problem worse. Jets moved so fast that engagement windows became even smaller, and simply adding more guns was no longer practical. At this point, someone proposed revisiting Gatling's multi-barrel system, this time powered electrically instead of by hand. Interestingly, Gatling himself had experimented with electric power, but the technology of his era wasn't capable of making it reliable. The .50 caliber machine guns of early jet fighters fired quickly, but lacked the punch needed to destroy modern enemy jets. Larger autocannons offered more destructive power, but suffered from lower firing rates and unreliable magazine systems. What the military needed was a cannon that combined high destructive power with an extraordinary rate of fire. In 1946, the U.S. Air Force launched Project Vulcan. Engineers began developing a 6-barreled 20 millimeters electrically driven rotary cannon capable of firing 6,000 to 7,000 rounds per minute. Essentially a modern Gatling gun taken to extremes. Multiple barrels prevented overheating, as each barrel fired only a fraction of the total rounds. A new linkless feed system was created to avoid the dangers of spent casings or metal links damaging the aircraft. The result was the M61 Vulcan cannon, introduced in the late 1950s. It fired around 100 rounds per second, though most aircraft carried only 500 to 1,000 rounds, requiring pilots to use short, precise bursts. The F-104 Starfighter was the first to mount it, and soon the Vulcan became standard on American fighter aircraft. The Vietnam War provided its combat debut, where it quickly proved lethal against Soviet-supplied MiGs. A short burst could tear an enemy aircraft apart with frightening accuracy. It also became a devastating weapon for strafing ground targets, shredding vehicles and tanks. Seeing its effectiveness, engineers expanded the Gatling concept into various calibers. The M134 minigun was born, essentially a 7.62 mm Gatling system producing up to 6,000 rounds per minute. Initially mounted on Huey helicopters for self-defense, it soon equipped Cobra gunships and other aircraft for close support missions. North Vietnamese forces learned that dense jungle offered little protection when miniguns could literally cut through vegetation and anything hiding within it. The weapon produced the iconic BRRR sound, a continuous roar created by extremely rapid fire. Tracers looked like bright laser beams, though each tracer represented only one out of every 5 rounds fired. The U.S. Air Force escalated even further with the AC-47 Spooky, a transport aircraft modified with 3 miniguns firing out the left side. It circled above targets and soaked them in bullets. In one instance in 1969, it fired 63,000 rounds in a single night to save a South Vietnamese outpost. Another mission saw an AC-47 kill around 300 enemy fighters by firing more than 20,000 rounds while orbiting a hillside. The success of Spooky inspired the AC-119 and AC-130 gunships, which carried combinations of miniguns and Vulcans, 8 Gatling guns firing together with terrifying effect. Gatling systems were also mounted on vehicles, river patrol boats, and even armored personnel carriers like the M113 equipped with a 20mm Vulcan. Originally meant for anti-aircraft defense, soldiers quickly realized it could obliterate almost anything on the ground as well. Roughly 10,000 miniguns were produced during the Vietnam War, and experimentation continued long afterward. But the evolution did not stop there. In the 1970s, engineers created the massive Gu-8 Avenger, a 7-barreled 30mm Gatling cannon weighing around 1,800 kilograms with its feed system. It fired 3,900 rounds per minute, about 65 rounds per second, using high explosive and armor-piercing shells. It was designed specifically to destroy Soviet tanks during the Cold War, especially using depleted uranium penetrators. While modern tanks can resist 30mm hits from the front, A-10 Warthog attacks from above, striking the thin roof armor. A burst of 30mm fire could disable or destroy a tank, and during the Gulf War, the A-10 eliminated hundreds of armored vehicles. Navies also adopted Gatling systems, such as the Phalanx CIWS introduced in 1980, a radar-guided ship defense turret armed with a Vulcan cannon able to automatically shoot down incoming missiles. Additional variants include the 5.56mm microgun and experimental .50 caliber rotary guns, though the M134 remains the widely used model for vehicles like Humvees. Ironically, Gatling's original goal was to reduce battlefield casualties, yet his invention evolved into one of the deadliest weapons ever built, deployed on platforms he could never have imagined: jet fighters, gunships, ships, and armored vehicles. And for now, there is no indication that the Gatling-style system will be retired anytime.